Shavuot Tov, everyone. Good Vach. And it's very exciting that here we are. I made it. If you were counting Omer, I made it. So it was very exciting tonight. Um, so when Rabbi Jay asked me for some topics, I said, what are sort of like the big hit parade questions that always come up? And there's really, Jews are never at a loss for questions. But two that particularly come up, and I'm very grateful to be in such a wonderful program. I'm very honored, and it's always a great group of people who tune in. And often I get some really, really good questions. I'm very honored to stay up later tonight, although Baruch Hashem, not all night. That is tomorrow night. But that's the question. Why do we do, here are the two questions. Why do we stay up all night? Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Why do we do that? And of course, connected with that is, why do we eat dairy? Right? So some people are big meat eaters. Some people are big dairy eaters. I still am craving the blintzes from Diamond Dairy Restaurant in the Diamond District that Nebuchadnezzar closed. And the closest I've come to that taste is a place, if you're ever in New York and you're ever in Williamsburg, I'm not an influencer on Amazon. I'm not making any money from this. Go to a place called Cafe Lee. Not Cafe Ole, Cafe Oli, because it's on Lee Avenue. And they have everything ranging from pizza, veggie burgers, to the most delicious blintzes. So why do we eat blintzes on Pesach? Why is Costco in the US in major Jewish areas continually sold out of cheesecake? Right near Yontif. So I'm gonna tackle the first one of why do we stay up? And also, if you notice that the name that we ascribe to it is called Tikkun Leil Shavuot, right? So we know, like, if you know Tikkun Olam, right? So Tikkun sounds like, is it just like a means of getting together, or is it a repair for something, right? Is there something that we're trying to make up for? So the custom of staying awake on Shavuot night, they seem to point to the 1500s, that the mystics in Tzfat were the ones who popularized this. And we know, like, figures like Rabbi Yitzhak Luria and then Rabbi Yosef Karo. And we see that the commentary on the Code of Jewish Law is a commentary, the Magen Avraham, in the 17th century. We see that commentary, the Magen Avraham writes the following. He writes, it is stated in the Zohar. Now, the Zohar is the mystical writing that, like, Kabbalah comes out of. It is stated in the Zohar that the early pious ones would stay awake all night and engage in Torah study. And already most of those who study Torah have adopted this practice. But fine, so we know that that's where it sort of started. But why requires us to go back into rabbinic literature that tells us that in Shir Hashirim Rabbah, the Midrash, this rabbinic telling, tells us about the day the Torah was given. And according to this Midrash, it says Bnei Israel slept through the entire night because sleep during the season of Shavuot is pleasant and the night is short. Rabbi Yudin said, not even a flea stung them. The Holy One, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, came and he found them asleep. Okay, so, oh my gosh, like weather issues, the beautiful weather, right, is telling us that they're getting ready for Matan Torah, and early summer is great weather, and they just ended up falling asleep. The night is not that long. They fell asleep. So what does that mean? They were sleeping. They were not ready for the moment, right? And it sounds like some story that, like, Mashiach's coming. There's a Reb Shlomo story about that, where Eliyahu Navi pays a visit to people that were very poor, and the husband missed the whole thing because he fell asleep. So here we see that this idea of staying awake, what does it do? It repairs, right? Tikkun. That's the tikkun, that it repairs that what happened to our ancestors, that because they slept all night, Hashem had to be the one and say, remember like with parents, where you have to go on a big trip, it's the first day of school, you stayed up too late, they come in, come on, get up, get up, get up, right? Stayed up, right? Get up. But we see in the Midrash is that they slept all night and God was the one who had to wake them and say, hello, Matan Torah, pull yourself together, get ready. So by staying up at night, it became that source of a tikkun, of a repair. That's what we're doing. We're engaging in a repair of what happens. But the Zohar, right, provides a more mystical image. And in the Zohar, it says, thus the early pious ones did not sleep on this night of Shavuot. They studied Torah, saying, let us acquire a holy inheritance for us and our children in two worlds. And Rabbi Shimon would say that when his like study group would gather around him on this night, they would say, let us array the jewels of the Kala, the jewels of the bride. So tomorrow she will appear before the king, between the sovereigns, suitably adorned and bedecked. So what is we get from this image of the Zohar? Something completely different. It's not about sleeping. It's not that we overslept. It's rather that there was like a cosmic wedding going on. Torah is the bride, and those who are stay awake are compared to companions, preparing her for her meeting with the king. So it becomes like that by our staying up, we're actually assisting the partnership of the Torah and Hashem. Very anthropomorphic, not sure. In fact, I know Rambam Maimonides, who was more of a rationalist, didn't like anthropomorphisms. He wouldn't like this. But according to the Magen Avraham, then we have two reasons for Tikkun Leil Shavuos. And one is we've got to take responsibility for we overslept. We got to make up for that. And the other is a mystical reason that we adorn the Torah as a bride. Now, there's always like an interesting question that's asked: why don't we dance? Right? We don't have dancing with the Torah, right? On Shavuos. When do we do that? Right? We do that at Simchas Torah. One of the answers is given is because that is a moment where we have gone through the whole cycle of the Torah. Here we're just getting it. That is like, in other words, we're dancing for joy that here it is that we completed the Torah and we're starting it again. Now, now there are two things that come up, and that is that we see some rabbis write, and this is very interesting, that staying up all night is not obligatory, right? And they say if it's difficult for you, if it's difficult to stay up all night, then you can go to sleep, right? Because then what happens, then you could be knocked out. Not everybody can pull all-nighters, if that's something maybe you do in college. But here, I'll tell you something interesting I have from my own experience, because Kanai Nahara, please God, I'll be teaching into the wee hours of the morning at 3 to 4 different venues, right? I find it's easier to stay up if you're actually deeply, if you're teaching Torah, it's the easiest. But if you really can get into it, you don't want to go to sleep. And if you feel sleepy, this is another reason for the spread of Tikkun Leil Shavuos. I don't think most people know. Then what keeps you up? How don't you conk out? What is a method of being able to pull off an all-nighter? Cheesecake doesn't do the trick, but what do most people do?
Coffee.
And the significance of coffee is that coffee was only discovered somewhere around the 1300s in North Africa, in Yemen, and it's made its way to Eretz Yisrael. And it was discovered and used by the Sufi Muslims. The Sufi Muslims are kind of like a very ecstatic approach to their faith. Lots of dancing, like whirling dervishes type of dancing. very aesthetic. They discovered coffee. And what did coffee enable them to do? Stay up. And it made its way to Eretz Yisrael. And who discovered coffee? Those mystics in Tzfat. And once coffee was discovered that it had caffeine in it and it could prevent you from falling asleep, the whole concept of like Tikkun Chatzot, of being able to, people would stay up late, they'd wake up and then be able to stay up. But it helped make Tikkun Leil Shavuot doable because people had a means, they had some type of stimulant that would help them be able to stay up and learn all night. So it's to me, it's so interesting because that became the practical reason of people wait. And by the way, there's a whole genre of literature. It's a little bit, someone wrote a book about the connection of chocolate to Jews because of people who sold chocolate, but coffee had a very big impact on the Jewish community because it allowed people to learn with much greater ease because you could stay up. There were shilas that were raised about coffee houses that opened, kind of the Starbucks of their time, from non-Jewish sources. Could owners, could people go in there? Was it okay, even if they were serving other things? Could they go in there on Shabbos, on the way to shul, home from shul, if they had prepaid? These are not questions that we're asking now. There were questions that was asked in the 1600s. So we see the impact of coffee and coffee houses. But here, it's really something. And that idea then of staying up connects us then going all the way back to the mystics of Tzfat. And it's in the 16th century. And I think that's like a beautiful idea of a connection. I'll tell you a true story, which I always find very moving, that is told about Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach of blessed memory. He was learning in Lakewood. Prior to him becoming, known for his songs and melodies, etc., he was viewed as one of one of the best students of Rabbi Cutler, who was the Rosh Yeshiva at Lakewood. So Reb Shlomo stays up for Tikkun Shavuos, right? But we know how many nights of Shavuos are there. There are two. Now the second night. That I can speak from personal experience. I try to go to bed as early as I can and have a quicker yontiv because I'm like a little knocked out. Rosh Yeshiva is walking past the base medrash. It's like 2:00 in the morning on the second night, going into the second day. He sees Reb Shlomo sitting there. It's 2:00 in the morning. So he goes over to him and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm staying up all night." So he says, "What do you mean you're staying up all night?" He says, Tikkun Shavuos was last night. He said, "I know I stayed up, but I want to stay up all tonight." So Rabbi Cutler hears this, and he proceeds to give Reb Shlomo a kiss. There's someone else, those nadering nabobs of negativism people. They're always looking to catch you, right? They see this. There's someone else in the base medrash. Goes to Reb Cutler, goes, "Look, I don't mean to say anything, Rosh Yeshiva, but there's a halacha that when you're in a base medrash, what don't you do? You don't kiss anybody, right?" So this guy's a chutzpahnik, right? He's going to catch a Rosh Yeshiva, right? So Rabbi Cutler turns to him and says, he says, there's a halacha that when someone is carrying a Sefer Torah near you, right? When they're taking the Torah out, they're putting the Torah back, what do? You kiss the Torah. He says, tonight, Reb Shlomo is a living Sefer Torah. To me, that's really one of the most beautiful ideas, that it's an example. Halavai, we all should stay up on Tikkun Shavuos, but the idea of staying up a second night, wow, that's like a different madrega. But I think it's a reminder when it comes to Torah study, we have to try to push ourselves, but nobody should overdo it. Or if you're not up to it, it's not a halacha, it's a custom. And if you're going to be grouchy, if you're not going to be able to focus for like the next part of Yontif, and you're not going to be able to enjoy your cheesecake, set your own boundaries. This is where but try to do at least some learning. And I'm glad we're doing pre-learning. But why do we eat dairy on Shavuos? And I saw someone posted in the chat, they said, oh, they remember also those blintzes for Diamond Dairy. The blintzes, There were other restaurants. There was Ratner's in New York, a blessed memory, right? Like incredible pierogi. I mean, I can go down the list of all my favorite foods. Dairy restaurants today, there's a chat. They go, what happened to all the like golden oldies? Nobody likes pierogi anymore. Nobody likes blintzes. They say, oh, people eat salads, they eat fish. Okay, plenty of people eat pasta, but come on. I put the plea out there. Somewhere, somehow in New York, outside of Brooklyn, we need a good dairy restaurant. Okay, I don't know what those in other places have, especially in Canada. But what are the reasons? So there are a number of reasons why we eat dairy. Some have a deeper meaning, and some are of a more lighter nature. So we know that, among the top reasons is that when Bnei Israel is at Har Sinai, right, and gets the Torah. So what do we learn in the Torah, right? We learn about, for example, al shel gadiba chalev mo. You're not supposed to mix like meat and milk together, right? So up until this point, they didn't know about this stuff, right? You hadn't been schooled in yet. There wasn't like a prequel to what was going to come, and therefore, all of the way they had been cooking, all of their meat pots were considered traits. So what did they have to do? Oh my gosh, we can't eat the meat because now we have to figure out a way to kosher them. We have to get probably new pots because remember they were, clay pots. They didn't have, Teflon. They didn't have stainless steel necessarily. Maybe they had some kind of metal, but the point is that their cooking pots were now considered not kosher. So what was the only alternative? To eat dairy because it didn't require advanced preparation because you can milk cows, you can figure out how to have cheese. But here's the now here's the next question that came up. But wait a minute. Okay, they didn't have it. So why didn't they just slaughter the animals, kosher their pots, do hagala in boiling water, and cook fresh meat? Okay, so what's the problem with that? They said no, because they said Matan Torah that of Shavuot occurred on Shabbos, and what's prohibited on Shabbos? Shechita, slaughtering and cooking. So now they really had to have dairy products. But now comes the third question. Okay, and the third question is, but wait a second. If they couldn't do shechita on Shabbos, right, and they couldn't do and they couldn't do koshering their pots. How were they able to get milk on Shabbos? Because what can't you also do on Shabbos? Can't milk a cow, right? You can't milk a cow. In fact, one of the early questions that came up during the early days of where like Aliyah Aleph and Aliyah Bet was about like where kibbutzim were established that were observant kibbutzim, and they said, "What are we going to do about the cows?" Tsar Baalei Chayim, like the cows just can't go for 25 hours without being milked, and this was also before machines, right? It had to be done by hand, so that was an interesting question. So yeah, they say, is that how could they get milk if they couldn't milk the cows? So the answer is that they already had the milk, right? Because they needed milk to feed the animals that were with them. So they were well prepared. So milk they had, right? It was now perhaps because of all this milk that they drank, so many Jews I know are lactose intolerant, right? We have like an abundance of problems. But so those are some of the practical questions that came up and some of the answers. But Torah is also viewed as having, there's like a connection with milk. Because we learn in Shir HaShirim, it says, like honey and milk, the Torah lies under your tongue. So milk has the ability, right, to sustain our bodies. Like milk is important. It gives us strong bones, calcium. It certainly sustains babies, right? So the Torah is compared to that concept of milk because it provides spiritual nourishment. And of course, what is the gematria, the numerical equivalent of the Hebrew word for milk, which is chalav? It's 40. Okay, so how many days did Moshe spend on Har Sinai waiting for instruction in the whole Torah? 40, right? And then we know he would spend an additional, he kept he kept going back. He had to spend another 40 days praying for forgiveness, which culminates in, right, when he goes up on what we're the 40 days till Yom Kippur. And then he goes a third set of 40 days before he comes back with a new set of stone tablets. So 40 connected chalav is that significant. And also, they say there were 40 generations from Moshe, who recorded the written Torah, till the generation until we get to the Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah. So that we have beautiful idea here of this continuity, of this connection of spiritual nourishment, and also this practical, this gematria, which is very nice, of the 40, right? So then we go back, especially because that we're observing something the mystics did. So the Zohar, in the Zohar, it teaches us that there addresses there are 365 days of the year, though each day corresponds to one of the negative commandments. Okay, so the negative, it's not that they're bad, it's just things that, let's say, we're not supposed to do. So the Zohar asks, what is the mitzvah that corresponds to the day of Shavuot? So we take a look at the Torah. In Shemos, it says, bring bikurim, the first fruits, to the tabernacle. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. So what they say is, since the first day for bringing bikurim is on Shavuot, right? And what do we have another name for Shavuot, right? If you were in the Bible contest in Israel, if that question came up, you now know the answer, because the Torah calls Shavuot the holiday of bikurim, right? So that's something. And the second out of that verse, which refers to don't cook a kid in its mother's milk, is the negative commandment, right? The do not do, that's connected to Shavuot day. So therefore, it's very interesting. That's why people have a custom, which is to eat a meal actually of dairy, but then to wait a little bit of time and have a meat meal. So that by doing that, it corresponds to this idea of even the 2 loaves that were brought to the Beis Hamikdash that were eaten on Shavuos. That's like a dairy one and a meat one, and never the twain shall meet. Okay, I just have one meal. Chabad Hasidim, a lot of them, like they have a kiddush, like the first day where they have dairy at the kiddush, then they wait a bit, and then they'll have a main meat meal, right? So that's another reason. The other thing, which is also interesting, is that one of the other names for Har Sinai, from Mount Sinai, is it's called Har Gavnunim, the mountain of majestic peaks. And what is the word for cheese in Hebrew? Gvina, which etymologically is related to the secondary name for Har Sinai. And if we keep taking, I don't know, some people don't like gematria. I like gematria. I think it's a great tool, right? If you take the gematria of Gvina, cheese, what is it? It's 70. What does it correspond to? The traditions that we say, the 70 faces of Torah. So that's like a great thing. We've got 40, we've got 70, right? And one of the other reasons that's also given is that when Moshe, right? So what do we learn? We learn that Moshe, right, was born on the 7th day of Adar. He was with his family for 3 months before he was already getting too big. They couldn't keep him at home. They put him in the Teva, and he goes down the Nile. And who's he rescued by, right? Like Bitya Bat Paro. And right away, there's a problem. What does she need, right? She needs a wet nurse. And what does the Medrash teach us? That all of the Egyptian women that were hired to be Moshe's wet nurse, what was the issue? Refused to nurse. So it says that he recognized that he needed his mouth to be completely pure, that he had to be sustained by somebody from within his own community, right? And therefore, who does who does Bitya find, right? What is the great miracle? That Yocheved, his actual mother, right, becomes his wet nurse. So it's such like a crazy thing that they send him away, but they end up being, the mother ends up being able to be the wet nurse. So it's this idea that, and when did she begin to feed him? Drum roll, please. The sixth day of Sivan. What falls in the sixth day of Sivan? Shavuot. Isn't that a great midrash? I love that. Wow. It's just how all those pieces, fit together. So then among the last questions that is connected with this is, according to one view, they said that Har Sinai, right, the day at Sinai was actually the first time that Jews ate dairy products. Why? Because there was a prohibition, right, which is Aver min hachai, that you're not allowed to eat a limb from a live animal. What does that teach us? So maybe milk, right, would be included in the prohibition. All right. So that, and because Aver min hachai is one of the 7 Noahide laws, which Jews also observed, before they got the Torah, right? So the before that, maybe they didn't have like dairy products. But what's the problem with that? Okay. We go back to Bereshit when Avraham has, right, the guests that are coming to tell him about the happy news that's going to come. What does he feed them? He feeds them dairy products. All right. So I don't understand something. So sometimes they say, so he was serving dairy, he was serving meats. They said, no, you see, he had like ruach and nevuah to know you don't mix meat and milk. And at the time of Abraham, he served them dairy and he served it separate from meat. But we said that it seems like, was this the first time if you're saying at Har Sinai that we ate dairy, how do you explain Abraham? So the way one of it's explained is that when you talk about eating a limb from a live animal, right? It's a piece of meat, it has bones, it has sinews. So that's what has always been. You can't pull it off of an animal, and that's not allowed, right? But milk, right? It comes from a live animal, but it doesn't have any bones, and therefore Avram was permitted to feed the milk to even his non-Jewish guests, because technically they were also bound by Sheva Mitzvot, B'nai Noach. So Jews only became, it was to non-Jews it was served, but only at Matan Torah when we're told that Eretz Yisrael is a land flowing with milk and honey. The Jews, did they have the permission to eat dairy food? And that is one of the reasons why then on Shavuot, where particularly the custom is to eat dairy. It doesn't mean you can't eat meat, but you have to at some point figure out how to eat dairy. And we want those shares. If anybody has, I don't know if Costco is publicly traded, but I do know that when I spoke to the manager last week as to why the cheesecake I ordered didn't have hashgacha, he told me it does, but there's a printing problem with the labels. And he says, I know, he said, I told everybody, this is that holiday where the Jews eat all that cheesecake. He said, I don't know why they're eating cheesecake, but we better be well stocked. And we better make sure that all the labels show the certification. He says, and I'm looking at right now on my window. He said, I can see that certification. So I'm guaranteeing it, right? So therefore, I feel like I'm compelled now to call the manager at one of these Costco's and say, do you want me to tell you why we actually eat cheesecake? I don't have to give him all the reasons. But that I think at least he knows. Many Jews don't even know what Shavuot is coming up. That's sad. Many Jews don't even know about cheesecake, but if we can get cheesecake as our kiruv, as our way in to bring people closer to Torah, bring it on. And if you're lactose intolerant, go get your lactate pills in bulk. That's all I can say. Everybody should have a wonderful yontif, and just let's get those hostages home and Israeli soldiers out of harm's way, and just let's have a real feeling of unity, ki ish echad, b'lev echad, as one people, as one person with one heart. So thank you, Rabbi
Amen.
Jay. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Okay.
Friedman. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. As I think we have cheesecake in the fridge. Okay. If I could have, okay. It's my one time a year, but very good. And
All
it's
right.
way better than Costco's. I guarantee you the cheesecake in our fridge is 100 times better than
I'm, sh-
Costco's
I'm
cheesecake.
sure it is. So,
It's not-
all right. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Shavuot Tov.
Okay. Shavuot Tov. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sure.
Rabbi Leiptag, where
Yeah,
are
you
you?
hear
I
me?
mean, you're in Stamford, no?
Not yet. I'm in Detroit today.
Oh, in
South.
Detroit today. Right, right. You're in Detroit. Okay, good. You ended Shabbos even later than we did.
Oh yeah, like we got our show at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah. So you beat
We're
us.
still on at like 10:15.
Okay, we're starting in 25 seconds. Everybody stretch, and then the Rabbi Leiptag on weeks.
So
And tomorrow, of course,
you made me
tomorrow.
co-host from what? From which
I'm,
account?
I'm sorry.
Did you make me co-host?
I did make you co-host.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
I think so. Yeah, the
Okay, fine.
Menachem is co-host. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
on from two
Oh,
screens.
you're on the M Leaptag. Okay, I'll make that co-host too. Just give me 1 second.
No, actually, before you
While I
do,
speak,
can you
tomorrow
make me
morning, of course,
both?
we're back at 9:15 in the morning Eastern. Tamar Weisman, Gila Rosen, Rabbi Eric Grossman, and Dr. Sokolow will be our four speakers tomorrow. 2 hours, 9:15 to 11:15. So please join us as we continue our Tikkun Leil and Tikkun Yom Shavuos in advance. Okay,